Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today, I have Mike Howard on. And one thing that we were just saying before I clicked record is that we were following each other probably about eight, 9 years ago now. And the funny thing is that the messages are still the same. And it's just now they come with tinsel and fairy dust and bright lights and all of this confusion that kind of takes away from the core message of, okay, so what are the habits that we need to live a lean lifestyle? And there's kind of this confusion between dieting and living lean. And as you heard in the podcast a few weeks ago, living lean is so much harder than just losing weight. They are not the same thing. Lean habits are not the same thing as dieting. So here's Mike Howard. I'm going to let him talk about his take on what lean habits versus dieting habits are.
All right, sounds awesome. Thank you, Ruby, for having me. This is an honor, and it's been great to finally do this after sort of sharing each other's content after whatever it is, 7 or 8 years. But you're absolutely right. I think a lot of these core things are the same, but now there's just fairy dust sprinkled on it and different things and more noise, right? The space is a very noisy one. So I'm thankful that there are people like you out there that kind of help cut through some of that noise and get a clear signal and just no nonsense stuff. So that's great. Your followers and your clients are very lucky to have you. So yeah, no, I think that's a big discernment here when we talk about between sort of dieting and sort of the sustainable habits. And I think that's the first part right there is when you think of dieting and there's different sort of definitions of it, but it tends to conjure up this image of just doing something more temporarily, whereas sort of the habit framing tends to be more sustainable long term, right? So whereas like a weight loss habit or something like just like dieting habit is something that is focused primarily and ostensibly on just that number or chasing a number or chasing a scale, chasing a tape measure or a body fat percentage. I see sort of lean habits is looking beyond the scope of just weight and body fat and that sort of thing. And it's just sort of living a life that you feel comfortable, confident in, and one that gives you the energy to do the things you want to do, one that gives you the vigor and all of that good stuff that comes along with living your healthiest life, right? So it's a huge array of different things and an array of different benefits, right? So we talk about these non-scale victories. So I think that's the biggest thing right there is the habits are sustainable. They're not meant to be short-term. They're not meant to be focused strictly on a number. They're meant to coexist with your life and not dominate your life. So hopefully that kind of answers things in a nutshell there. We can, trail off from there in any direction you'd like.
The important part you just mentioned there, they're not meant to dominate your life. And I think when a lot of people focus on dieting and losing weight, it becomes this all-encompassing thing where everything is about restriction. It's about how can I eat less? And like you mentioned with the scale weight, the measurements, once that becomes your sole focus, it's really hard to then detach from that. It's almost like when people, I'm pretty sure you have examples of this, when people lose large amounts of weight, that is all they've known for years of their life. It becomes very hard to then detach from that. So then it's either they go back to their very old habits, which they were trying to get rid of, or they live in this constant fear of losing any progress that they ever had. And this is kind of where it's in contrast to someone who's like the chronic dieter. I always say there's no such thing as a chronic dieter. If you were dieting your whole life, you'd be emancipated. You can't just keep losing weight. It's just we are in a chronic dieting mindset. And the habits of a lean person are completely different than the habits of a dieter simply because it's not what you do, but it's the reasoning behind it. And I think identity is a huge piece here. Where does identity fit into this?
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Just before you said that, I'm like, oh, identity. I should mention that. So we're on the very same wavelength there. But that's important, I think. And I think it comes down again to the framing the question. Framing it as what do I want to accomplish? It becomes about who do I want to become? right? So the accomplishments, the goal, the endpoints, the outcomes, that is more grounded in sort of that dieting mentality that you were talking about. Whereas the identity is who you want to be, how you want to show up, and how it reflects in your life and your own personal value system. So I think when you tackle it from that kind of a frame, it's less about force and more about aligning with who you are and who you hope to be as a person. And what I like to tell people is, just because you're not there, you may feel like you're in this rut and you've been in this rut for a very long time. You may feel like the least healthy person, or, whether that's the worst shape in your life, the heaviest you've ever been, you can still identify as somebody that is focusing on their health. So it may not be that you're in that place now, but if you have that mindset where you're like, yeah, no, I'm going to make this part of my identity, it just becomes about realignment and less about trying to force something. So I think that's massive right there. So yeah, well said. I think identity, finding your why, like your deep, most profound raison d'etre. So like if you were saying something to something to the effect of, okay, well, if you're looking and you're chasing that number, why do you want a certain look? Why do you want to achieve a certain goal? And then you sort of get underneath the surface of that. Oh, because I want to live a healthy life. And okay, I want to be able to look after my kids, or I want to be able to look after other relatives who are aging. I want to be able to, for example, like I went on this beautiful hike with my best friend, like in Utah, and it was this gorgeous thing. And I was thinking to myself, well, I want to be able to do this like 20 years, 30 years from now. If you have something attached to a deeper why, it becomes much easier to align with these habits and what you want to accomplish.
I think the reason why people struggle to look into their whys and their values is that it feels like this woo-woo detached thing. I don't see that as a fault of theirs. I see that as a fault of the way that values are spoken about is very woo-woo. It's like, no, it's not like, I value peace and zen, being like a hippie prancing through the freedom of the. No, it's like, what is this meant to bring you? Is this meant to bring you more connection to your family? I think this is where we need to become a lot more solid within ourselves as well. A lot of the time, the people around us aren't on the same wavelength as us, but it doesn't become just a fear of not being able to get to the end result. It becomes the fear of a whole new lifestyle that people are going to need to adopt in order to meet that. So it's almost like I've always struggled with this. This has always been on my mind. All my past receipts of dieting have just shown me gain the weight. But it's almost like, well, if you do this the right way and you're patient, and I think it's that practice, it's the patience, and it's the persistence. The more that you practice it, the more that you are patient through the process, it's that journey that you become the person. And in that journey, you start to evolve in your relationships with those around you. You start to build more confidence in using the biggest word of all, which is no, when people offer you things that aren't aligned with your identity. But it also means this is a powerful part with the lean minded versus dieting minded, which is what I now go into it. But you can also use the flexibility of, well, it's situational. Saying no is probably the most powerful word, but depending on the situation, maybe a yes is more aligned with your values. Saying yes, you got to connect to your loved ones a little bit more in the situation. But if you say yes all the time, then that is taking away from your values of no, but I want to be healthy and lean and feel good within my skin. But if I say yes in this situation, I know that I'm going to wake up and not feel that version of myself that I want to be. But we tend to never think about the version of ourselves that we want to be tomorrow. It's either 3 years from now, that's too far away, or we just want shit now, but we don't think about how we want to feel.
Yeah, I like that. There's a lot in there. And I think I'll start with, patience. And that's just like, I think we live in this world right now where we expect things instantaneously. And we're thrust into this false, just narrative that things should happen right away. We're faced with all these, whether it's on the bookshelves or it's in social media, that in like, if you're in a lineup in a queue at a grocery store, you'll see it in Women's World Magazine, this lose 20 pounds in like 3 weeks or whatever it is. And so we've sort of just been conditioned to think that these things should happen, A, fast, and B, without much effort, and C, sustainably, which is kind of the holy trinity of the diet lies, right? And you also mentioned a couple of things, and one of acronyms, I use the 5 Ps, and you mentioned 3 of them right off the top there, right? So it's that patience, right? But it's also the practice and the persistence, perseverance, right? So I also have play and presence as part of those 5 Ps. I sort sort of have this 5P system, but like that's crucial. I mean, I think most people fail because they don't manage those dips. When things do kind of stabilize, or they gain a little bit of weight back, or things get busy, they give up, not realizing that that's part of it. And I think the people that best manage those dips, those gaps, those crap hitting the fan moments or times in their life, the ones that manage that the best are the ones that have the best sustainable results, because they're like, they're starting from a place of, what, this is me, this is my identity, this is my lifestyle, and I'm not giving up ever, right? I may fall off track a little bit, and some wins might be a scale weight loss or a new PR. Other wins are not letting that next domino fall. So it depends what that, but we have to frame those both as wins, and knowing that it's a matter of when, not if, things are going to go sideways. And it's just about saying, you know what, this last week sucked, but you know what, I'm going to get back on it now. Not Monday, not January 1st, not after my birthday, but I'm going to get right back on it the very first chance I get. And we learn from each one of these experiences along the way. And it's like you said, like just that simple thing of just being able to say no, thank you more, but also being able to say yes, this time I will, because this is a 10 out of 10 dessert or whatever it is. And just, it still falls within your values, because it's okay to have, two values that may, initially seem like they're contradictory towards each other, but it's okay to have values of having some delicious food once in a while, but also, keeping with your central kind of goals and identity of being the healthiest person you can possibly be.
I love that a lot. And I do want to bring the play in later, but it's what you said with every action is a chance to then shift your trajectory. It's almost like if you look at an exponential curve that goes either up or down, you're always moving either up or down depending on your choice. But if you're not going to make the next best choice, you're going to continue on that downward trajectory. And exponentially, that's going to grow, because it's almost like that wolves analogy. What you feed grows. And that's almost the same with if you keep thinking about the fact that you're always struggling or always failing, all of these negative things berating on how you are in this rut, then that is exactly going to be your reality. And you're not going to get to where you want to be, because you can't envision anything other than where you are now. It's like, this is all I know. Well, what do you want? How do you want to feel? And like you mentioned with that scenario that two contradicting things can exist, it's like and or. It like there's an and. It's not like you only have this or this. It's they both can coexist depending on the situation. But I feel like people want to be a master of it all now.
Yeah.
They don't realize that it's almost like learning the piano. It's going to take time to figure out where the chords are. And then as soon as you master your right hand, you now have to learn a completely different clef for your left hand. And very soon, both of them can live in harmony. But at the same time, you can still make really good music with just your right hand. And while you're able to indulge in how good the right hand's going, the left hand is now going to be a struggle, yes, but you can still make good music. And that's kind of the same thing. It's just that most people are so focused on the fact that I suck, I can't read this clef. Well, hey, there are still some really good things going for you right now, because you put in the time to get to where you are now. You can now play with your right hand. And in that process, you start to learn the trade-offs of each of the choices that you're making. You start to learn that, okay, if I make this choice, I know that I'm going to feel better at the end. But if I make this choice, I know that I'll feel better in the moment, but I'm going to be really hungry later. I'm going to start craving more foods. And I know that you speak a lot on food environment as well. And I feel like that's a huge part of this. But before we talk about that and go into what are lean habits, what is it to be lean minded, the play part, what's the whole point doing this if you're not going to have some fun in your life in the process? It just becomes a drudge. And I feel like as soon as people decide to lose weight, that becomes, and like we said at the beginning, that becomes an all-encompassing thing. We forget about the fact that we're living a life that this should be enjoyed. We put pressure on ourselves to achieve a certain outcome. It becomes less about force and more about aligning as a person. But as soon as we set a goal that we want to lose weight, and now that, so we're recording this in close to December, most people are going to be putting pressure on themselves to lose the holiday weight or to fit in with their peers. their peers or their friends are now doing this challenge, or they see other people around them bring in the environment again. They're doing this crazy challenge because people are on a different alignment and they're just on a different wavelength than you are yourself. You might have been doing this fitness lifestyle for a while. You might already have quite a lot of backing behind you. But as soon as you see all of this stuff happening around you, you're like, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Why are they getting
Mm.
faster results? We get really lost in the noise. That's when the churn and burn of the I'm pressuring myself to achieve an outcome and I forget why I'm doing this. I forget all the reasons, narrow in on the process. I need to lose weight. I need to see results now.
For sure. And I think the last thing you said, there is a process. So instead of focusing on that outcome, because it does tend to be sort of outcome driven and we're moving towards a number, we're moving towards a goal. But if we do focus more on the process, which is kind of less sexy, right? But you know what I mean? It's just that it's grocery shopping and then it's cooking those groceries. And then it's, it's getting out, it's making sure we move, it's making sure we sleep well, it's making sure we're nurturing our closest social relationships, that sort of thing. And it's, like you said, making sure we are, saying no thank you a little bit more than we used to get things moving in that right trajectory, even though it's not going to be linear. So yeah, and then just to bounce off that, right? We were talking about, okay, do we eat this thing? Do we not eat this thing? It's about saying, okay, and the framing of it and saying, okay, using words such as like, not right now, I don't, or I'm choosing not to, instead of I can't, because I can't sort of takes the control out of your frame of mind, right? So this is about you almost taking control of your situations by saying, I'm choosing not to most of the time. And then sometimes I will choose to and do it without the guilt, right? So, because I think a big component if of this entire process is the self-compassion piece, where it's like, yeah, we're going to screw up, and being really hard on ourselves is actually counterproductive. And again, like you were talking about earlier, some things sound like woo woo, oh, self-compassion, look at me, I'm going to be spiritual and this and that. But self-compassion is actually grounded in evidence. It's powerful. And it is actually a way to improve. And they have done studies on this where outcomes tend to be better through those who are exercising more self-compassion rather than those that are beating themselves up. So knowing that piece is going to be extremely important too. And it is tempting, and it's okay to hold yourself to a higher standard. And self-compassion does not mean relegating yourself to, oh, well, I guess I just have no self-control. You know what I mean? Like, it's not letting yourself off the hook. It's not continuously doing that sabotaging habit. But again, going back to something you said earlier too, like sometimes for people, like the fear of change is a real thing, because with change comes some loss. And even though we know that these habits are detrimental to our health and well-being, it is the devil, we know. So that we and change to our brains is actually an emergency, right? Our brains perceive these types of drastic changes as like, oh my gosh, what's she doing, what's he doing, you know what I mean? So it becomes that much harder to break through that kind of headspace of just going into this place, even though you are going to have setbacks, and you're going to do it anyways, because you're not giving up, because you care too much about yourself. And part of self-compassion is self-care, is taking care of yourself. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of pieces to this. And I think if people are just a little bit more patient with themselves, right? And what you said, like you said too, that having that play element as well, and committing to a process instead of trying to chase goals, I think that's going to take you, that's going to make your end game that much better.
There was something you just said there that just struck a chord, and it's, you're not going to do that particular habit because you care too much about yourself. And I think I know this is the problem. Yeah, this is the most fundamental concept that you can take on board, because as soon as you do things out of, I want the best for myself, you start to make choices that will fill you up and not deprive you. But there was something that I saw someone post up the other day, and it's just like, are your eating practices and the way that you think about food in your body something that you will happily talk about doing with your children? Would you tell them about all of the ways that you speak about yourself, all of the ways you feel about your body, all of the ways that you approach your food? Because I would assume not. If you can speak to yourself with the same compassion, and I feel like if people don't forgive themselves for where they are now and stop living in the past, oh, but I was better before. Oh, but I shouldn't have done this. Like, it's my fault for X, Y, Z. It's like, yeah, okay, that happened, but you're for what you can become if you start to shift your habits. And one thing that I've realized as I got older and as I've noticed other people speak about the aging process, is that time starts to feel a lot more urgent as they age.
Mm,
And as we age, we start to be like, yeah, well, I don't have a lot of time to do it this way now. I have to hurry up and get
mm,
this off. And then I'll
mm.
worry about the habits later. Why can that be so detrimental to the process?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I've seen a lot of people in that very same situation because it has been years. And then you just sort of have that sinking feeling each time you think about it. You're like, oh my gosh, like I've just fallen further and further behind. And you're right. I think there is this mentality where I have to undo everything. But we've seen this same sort of soundbite for years and years. You've been in the industry a long time too. It's just like you cannot erase, 15, 20 years of detrimental habits in a 90-day program or some sort of quick fix type of way. So I think just committing to that process, going, okay, well, I'm going to choose day one instead of one day. And I'm just going to tackle this bit by bit. And where are my lowest hanging fruit? What are the things that I can collect easy wins with that are going to cumulatively get me to where I'm going to be? Because you're right. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, like the habits that feel good in the moment are typically not good for us, and the habits that are good for us in the moment typically feel horrible, right? So it's hard to commit to that process when it's, oh my gosh, it's painful to run or walk even sometimes, or it's painful to lift those weights. It's, oh my gosh, like eating vegetables again, like this is so unaccustomed to like what I've been doing for the past few years or however long it's been. So I think just committing to those, okay, what can you do now? Let's look at things realistically. You're a busy working person, maybe you have kids, maybe you're in a sandwich generation where you have dependence on one and the other end of the generational spectrum. There you've got a busy life, and lives are just, we just live in an unstable world, right? We have like, such socioeconomic instability, we've got like, health instability, we've got geopolitical instability, plus family dynamics, plus a lot of noise from social media. It's like, okay, let's focus in. Let's take a look at your own life right now. What is it that you can do? All right. Okay, I can do this. I can go for a 15-minute walk after dinner. Great. Awesome. Okay, I can grocery shop on this day. I can make a few healthy meals to feed myself and my family. You don't have to meal prep 21 meals. You can meal prep 10 meals and then go from there. And that's going to make a huge difference in your health compared to what you had been doing. So you may not lose the weight super fast by doing sort of a few minimal things, but it is going to move the needle, and it is going to consistently get you closer to where you're going to be. And if you play that game of patience and you just keep going, and when you have setbacks, you get back on there, you learn from it. It teaches you, it rewires your brain, and that's how we change our mindset often, is through these habits, right? And through these small habits. They don't have to be big habits. They have to be small, or they can be small, but they have to be consistent, because those habits and that action is neuroplasticity building.
It's hard to be consistent with something when you put so much pressure on yourself. It's hard to be consistent with something when you're trying to rush the process. It's hard to be consistent with a sprint when you know that you have a marathon distance to go. It's that whole so you can't sprint a marathon thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's when you mentioned the small steps aren't just small steps, they're teaching blocks. Because one thing that I realized the other day as I was walking, I was messaging people, asking them for critique on something. And then I'm like, this is probably something that's helped me quite a lot in my journey. And the fact that I actually actively go out there to get critiqued, to get like the failing quote unquote points pointed out, because
Mm-hmm.
I want to improve. And if we're
Mm-hmm.
always playing in our safe zone, we are not going to develop the tools for when something goes wrong. And that's where the lean habits comes in, because like most of us are now speaking more on perimenopause, on the aging process, and do things change as you get older? It's like, no, things don't change, except everything that you said with like, yeah, you may now have the sandwich where you're looking after older people and younger people. Your careers become more of a predominant factor. Like there are these demanding things that take you away from just focusing on you, which can let all
Mm-hmm.
these habits slide if it's like winning the lottery. You learned how to get a huge sum of money. Well, you didn't even learn how. You just bought a freaking ticket. You didn't learn how to make money. You didn't learn how to save. Whereas if you've had to learn how to save your whole life to get to a particular outcome, then when things get rocky, you're able to use those saving skills again. to get you out of that sticky situation. And this is where that identity piece comes in. This is where the environment comes in. We haven't spoken enough about environment. And again, what are these lean habits? A lot of
Mhm.
people can lose weight, but then they gain it back again. A lot of people struggle around the holiday season with learning how to manage things because they've only had to face whatever goal it is that they have outside of a situation where now it's abundant with food. And it's not just that, it's just like you worked your ass off for the majority of the year. The mindset as you approach the end of the year is, I'm such in a holiday mode. I don't feel like going to the gym. I just want to relax. I don't feel like pushing myself in the gym. I don't feel like picking the salad this time. You know that exhale where you just can't be bothered with everything.
Mm.
Whereas if you identify as someone who prioritizes their health and fitness, you realize that, yeah, you can kind of pull the lever back a little, but your choices are still going to be in the vote of, I want to know that I'm going to come out of this feeling good, feeling healthy still. I know that I can actually enjoy these experiences because I got myself to a place where enjoying these experiences doesn't mean a huge setback. But I also want you to bring in the fact that there are people in different starting positions where
Mhm.
someone may have a lot of weight to lose at first. So maybe they don't have as much of a calorie budget, so to speak, to play with
Mhm.
than someone who's already done the habits for long enough and now they have a bigger budget. They earned that budget, so to speak. But it doesn't mean that
Mhm.
this is your forever if you still have a lot to lose. It just means that this can be you soon. It's just that whole patience, practice, perseverance that will
Mhm.
come. It doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it now. It just means that you just need to keep doing these small steps, these small habits, because if you can commit yourself to the next 11 months before the next December comes around, you can achieve so much in those 11 months if you stop stopping yourself. If you stop trying to rush the process and then having to redo it all over again, if you stop trying to force it with deficit mindset, whereas the lean mindset comes with that self compassion. And self compassion means calling yourself out on your own shit as well.
Absolutely. Let's start there because you've got a knack for sort of bringing things out of my brain that were just on the tip but didn't quite make it to my mouth. But yeah, but I think as a coach, that's basically sort of my mantra is just like my job isn't so much to call BS on you as it is for you to develop the wherewithal to call BS and recognize the BS that you're spouting, right? So both the BS that the lies that you're telling yourself, but also sort of the lies that you're sort of maybe telling the coach. But it's mostly the self stuff, right? Like calling BS on yourself and just but also calling BS on some of the bad self-talk. So it's not just about like, a punitive type of framing, right? So just say, yeah, but if you will develop those skills and you will be able to catch yourself faster going, okay, I'll wait till Monday. Wait, am I using an excuse? Okay, is this an actual barrier or is it just an obstacle that I can overcome? Is this, can I actually just go to the gym for 20 minutes? Yeah, I can. I don't have to just brush it off because I can't get there for an hour. Do I have to get like this, drive-through meal? No, I can probably, there's a grocery store right there. It'll take an extra 5 minutes. So it's just, I think a lot of the clients that do well, and some of my clients that have done particularly well have been the ones that have been able to find that plan B, right? Because having that backup plan is going to be crucial. Okay, that didn't work out. What's my next best option? Okay, that didn't work out either. What's my third best option? So you touched on a lot of different things there, and we can talk about the environment first if you want, and then we can dive into the holiday stuff if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, and
Uh,
for both of them, because there was something you said, this can relate to both of them. Most people don't plan for what could go wrong. And that
yeah.
relates itself both to the holiday season and to the food environment.
Completely. Yeah, exactly. There's this sort of mathematical theory that says it's the high probability of low probability events, right? The chances that like a tire will blow or you'll get a call from your child's school that your child's been throwing up is small, but that the incidence of any number of things that might possibly happen in a given week or month is actually quite high. So preparing for those things and it's about waking up going, okay, what can I do today? I had a terrible sleep. I'm going to sleep in a little bit. I'm not in my best mind frame. I missed the gym. Okay, what can I do today? I can still go for a walk. I can still eat as healthy as possible. I can still go to the grocery store. So I can still salvage this day. And thinking of the day instead of saying, oh, I can do this, I'll do better tomorrow, think of your day in quarters, right? Okay, so you had a crappy morning. You still have the afternoon, you still have the rest of the day. Like, you don't have to start Monday, you don't have to start tomorrow. So trying to bypass that what the hell effect and just, you don't have to eat the rest of the cookies. You had a few, that's okay. But just get past it and, acknowledge it was delicious, and you had a moment where you just, you were stressed out, and, acknowledging and taking that step back and going, okay, yeah, you know what? I wasn't hungry there. I was stressed. I was bored, I was lonely, I was angry. Any number of those things sort of prompted this eating situation. And you know what? It happens. It's okay. But next time, here's how I'm going to show up differently. And I think segueing in terms of showing up differently, we talk about the holidays, right? So you had mentioned, and I think you articulated it wonderfully, is just like, okay, staying within your identity, saying, okay, health is my priority. And the thing about the holidays, especially the Christmas holidays and Thanksgiving for the US and Canada, we had ours a month ago, and it's not as much of a big deal. But for the US, you still have two major holidays. I don't know when this is going to air, but I think Thanksgiving is this coming weekend in the US. But you've got these two major holidays. So it's interesting too, looking back at the evolution of, say, social media. And I don't know if you remember this, Ruby, but like 10, 12 years ago, people were saying, okay, how many burpees does it take to burn off an apple pie or turkey or whatever it is? And we were just focused on like, okay, how are we going to escape these calories through exercise? And it was just sort of a really weird and almost like toxic way to kind of look at holidays. And then I feel the pendulum almost swung in the other direction. And I actually kind of feel a little bit like, you don't want to step in there too much, but say, okay, but just there's a difference between relaxing and eating all your favorite foods and just kind of letting things completely go. So my approach with this, when I talk to clients about it, when I talk to the general population at large, I'm like, okay, how do you want to show up this holiday? How have the past several holidays gone? When you kind of wake up on January 1st, were you like, you know what, I did pretty well. I ate the foods I loved. I did some relaxing. I watched several movies. I did binge marathons with certain shows. But you know what? I got my exercise in. I got protein. I made sure I ate some vegetables. I didn't overdo it. That's great. If you come out of that in that type of situation, that's awesome. But chances are, and I'm going to take a guess here, a lot of these previous years, you probably came out of there going, okay, I put on 7 pounds. I feel awful. I was an absolute slug. I did not say no to anything. And is that your best case scenario too? Probably not, right? So I'm looking at finding this happy medium where it's like, okay, how do you want to show up? How do you want to wake up sort of close to January 1st? And what's that going to look like for you? Because the thing is about Christmas, it's like, it's 1 day, it's 2 days, it's 3 days, but it's 6 weeks long when you really look at it, because the holiday parties start like in November. I just talked to a few clients. They've already had their Christmas parties, right? And the gingerbread's already out, and all the snacks and the calories and the chocolates and everything associated with Christmas, all these things are great. But if you are just not taking your foot off the gas for like 6 weeks, it's going to show up in ways that you don't want it to. A few meals, like rich meals and all the pies and everything like that, that's fine. I mean, you know what? And if you come out of there and you're a pound heavier, so what? It's probably not body fat anyway. You know what I mean? So it's finding that medium where you're like, you're still staying true to your own values, your own identity, but you're also enjoying it, enjoying the company, enjoying the traditions. I would never want somebody to go into a holiday season nervous about what to eat and what not to eat. This should be a relaxing thing. This should be joyful. This should be amazing. Really just take it all in, but do it so mindfully, and really do keep top of mind how you want to show up and what you want to get out of this entire experience.
How you want to show up. That is probably the biggest part of it all, because it's, do you want to show up? It's not just how you want to show up, it's how do you want to feel when you put your bed to pillow, when you put your head to pillow that night. Do you want to, there is a spectrum of over restriction and over abundance, where if you go in with the mentality of, I want to be super strict, I want to be super good this Christmas, I don't want to blow it, blah, 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 I always blow it, so I'm going to make sure that I am on my track. So you want to enjoy yourself that little bit more. And it's difficult when you're in this constant internal fight with yourself. Whereas if you actually just ask yourself, on this spectrum do I want to be? What actions will make me feel at my best? What choices do I want to make? What do I not want to make? And like we said, planning ahead for what could go wrong where most people don't. You mentioned before that people will say, I have this gym session and this is what's planned. But if they can't make that whole gym session, if they can't do things to the absolute best, then they just don't worry about it. And then that becomes a habit, that a walk, then that is a better option than doing nothing. It's moving away from that all or nothing mentality. Pantry, that's quote unquote off plan. But if they actually track that food and build awareness around that food, they realize that that wasn't actually how people handled Christmas the last time, because there are all these holidays that are coming together at the end of the year. And when you listen to this, it's going to be sometime in December. This happens every single year. And our concept of time as we get older narrows and narrows. And before you know it, it's Christmas again in 2 months' time. Like 2 months, literally. It feels like it was just 2 months ago. But you mentioned the gingerbread is already out. That stuff was out since Halloween passed. And as soon as Christmas is over, we freaking Easter eggs down the aisles. I was like, Easter chocolate, it's special. Easter eggs are made out of special chocolate compared to normal chocolate. It's like, no, it's just packaged as an Easter egg. So for some reason, our brain just perceives it differently. And this is why learning is so important in the process, because it's not that you can't have the chocolate. Like, have chocolate every night for dessert. A lean-minded person would allow that chocolate for dessert and see it as, this is something that I'm allowing myself as a discretionary intake. I'm not restricting myself from it, because we know that when you restrict something for a period of time, that never ends out well in the end, because as soon as you bring it back in, it's like, I don't know how to fit this into the context of my goals. And if you look at those who get the best results, they have support in the process, because this shit isn't easy to navigate. This shit isn't easy to learn and fit into the context of your life. But people think that they should already know how to do this because they eat food, because they know how to move their bodies, because it's such a quote unquote simple thing to do. And there's information everywhere. But people are still struggling with this very thing. But this is kind of where it's time flies. Most people won't even remember where they struggled last Christmas to be able to try to offset it this Christmas. Think about that. Time flies. Yet in the moment, people are just so desperate to lose the weight, where it's like, take your time over the year. That is 11 months of progress that you can make before you need to face it the next December. And if you just put yourself straight into a deficit restriction mindset versus a lean habits mindset, because it's not about the fact that you need to earn your calorie deficit or earn your right to diet, which I kind of say sometimes, and I used to say a lot. Like, a lot of people are in a place where they need to actually lose body fat to be healthy. It's more the fact that your mindset should not be focused on restriction. That's been your whole life. It's how about thinking about lean habits, because the lean habits will get you to where you want to be without you thinking about dieting.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and we talk about the holidays, and it's like you said, I think you sort of alluded to it, but don't worry. So if your habits are reasonably good from January to like December 20th, you're not going to have to worry too much about that period between the 21st and the 30th. I mean, without going completely off the rails, of course, but like, I think we focus too much on there. And then if your year went kind of so, your mentality may be, okay, well, there's January 1st, so I'm just going to use this as kind of the Last Supper type of thing, right? Where I just kind of go crazy, because there's always going to be tomorrow, there's always going to be January, right? And I think thinking in terms of the presence, right? So that's one of the 5 Ps, right? Presence. Okay, what can I do right now? What can I do to still enjoy myself, but I'm still going to be true to myself and get that activity in. I'm still going to get some protein in, or whatever it is. I think it's picking your spots and seeing what you can do. And just making the holidays just about enjoying the company you're in, and just everything that the holidays have to bring, but just making sure you're true to yourself. You're getting out for walks, you're getting out, and just maybe be the leader in that, and just say, okay, we're going to play a game of football, we're going to just do something active, or hey, we're going to do a workout, I'll take you through a workout as well. Do something fun that's activity related, go skating, or depending on where you are. But I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think we talked about our environments, and we're constantly in some sort of environment. So the best that we can manage and engineer our own environment, the better off we're going to be. And there's so much stock in virtue and sort of this moral attachment to willpower or discipline. And we always like revere these people that have such great discipline. When the fact is, when they do studies on these high achieving people, it's not that they have more willpower or even discipline. It's that they set their lives up in such a way that it makes willpower less of a factor or an issue. So starting with the home, like, I could sort of flip my camera around. Like if I'm not tripping over exercise equipment, I'm probably not going to use it. Right. And that's kind of my plan B. Okay. If I didn't get to the gym, like last night, I was like, okay, I didn't get to the gym, but I did a home workout. So I'm like, okay, yeah, it's not the most ideal thing, but I can do something. I can do a half hour. I can put a TV show on and just do that. So am I coming through here still? You got me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, got it. I just wanted to make sure we weren't frozen there. But yeah, so setting your home environment up in such a way, because that's where we spend a lot of our time. If you can control that environment really well, you're going to make some really great progress. So that comes down to good grocery shopping, the shop, chop, and prep habit, right? So making sure that things that are healthy are eye level, making sure that you can have access to healthy snacks when you're leaving. So then you have your out of home environment where you're like, okay, just plan ahead. Take leftovers to work if that's where you're going, or have a backpack. If you drive, have an inventory in your glove compartment of things that are high in protein but not perishable, like beef jerky or handful of nuts, something like that to at least tide you over. It could even be protein bars as a last resort, right? So, which is better than hitting the drive-through. It just gives you enough so that you can get home and then cook. And then, related to like Christmas and holidays, we also have a social environment. So even that goes on all year, right? And some people are more social. So, and we're wired for empathy as humans, and we tend to level to our friend group. There's that saying that we're kind of the sum total of our closest 5 friends or something to that effect. I probably butchered that quote up a little bit, but the fact being that, we are influenced heavily by what our friends do. For example, if one of our friends becomes obese, we're like something like 52% more likely to become overweight. But it works in reverse too. If somebody in your circle quits smoking, for example, you're 36% more likely to quit smoking. So I think it's managing those environments too, where you're sort of like, okay, you're a little bit more upfront with your friends. You're like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to hang out with you. Hey, can we do something maybe a little bit more active? We don't always have to go to restaurants. And if we do go to restaurants, just pick your spots. Like, you know what I mean? Just say, okay, well, this night I'm going to have like 1 glass of wine. I'm going to have the chicken wings, but I'm going to make sure I have a salad. I don't have a starter, right? So working around it where you're not feeling like, you have to just eat salad, but also not feeling like you have to hyperindulge like you normally would. Again, showing up differently and just not controlling your environment, but managing the best way you can, because the social impact is everything. You don't want to like lose friends over it. You don't want to not go out. You don't want to not participate in life, because we already as a society have a loneliness problem, right? So you want to make sure you're nurturing those friendships and those relationships, but without the cost of just, overdoing things and having it be not aligned with your goals and identity.
I feel like if people don't take the time to build that identity with the patience element, with the let's not do this in 12 weeks element, it's going to be really hard to say no in those situations, to flex the no, to know when it's the right time to say the yes. And rest and recovery in training isn't just about training. Rest and recovery comes in everywhere. And if you're always trying to grind it out to lose the fat, the sprint there, always focusing on, I did this bad habit, I'm a bad person, I need to hurry up and lose the fat, I haven't been focusing on fat loss for ages. Like, well, actually, you have, because it's always been in the back of your mind. We need to shift your habits to something else that empowers you, because if you're always thinking about shrinking yourself, if you're always thinking about when can I go into this harder phase of life where I'm just grinding it out, you're missing the point. The point isn't to go through that suffering, it's to be able to work out what habits are the ones that are going to lead to that outcome that you want, of living leaner, of getting to the end results. Because if everything is looking good on paper, you're apparently doing the things, what is it then that is going to lead you to fall off? Or if you're not getting results from everything that's looking good on paper, what are you missing? And you mentioned the home environment and all the things that are very blatantly obvious, but work environment isn't just what's surrounding you. A lot of people have the stress of the work environment. And then as soon as they come home from work, most people have a habit where it's just go to the pantry, go get a glass of wine. So where are your current habits letting you down? And stopping habits is one of the hardest things to do if you're not going to replace it with something that's better. Because you can't just stop a habit and then have a blank space there. Because human wiring is just like, well, usually I go do this. If that is your usual wiring, it's going to keep happening unless you either shift your environment or replace that habit with something else that is going to serve you. And you mentioned something in there about rewind a bit, actually, because I liked that part where you mentioned when you approach this with the mindset of, okay, so there's going to be this social occasion coming up. You can't have every social occasion as a free for all, as a this is the most important opportunity of my life. It's knowing, okay, so which ones of these are the most important ones? Because there's always going to be occasions that pop up where we will get deviated off plan. And willpower is not something that is going to hold you through this. It's not something that's going to hold you through life, especially like this is why appetite is not something to rely on ever. Appetite's so false because you can be full and then smell a pumpkin pie or freshly cooked, I would say turkey, but turkey's protein, but just like freshly cooked pudding. There we go. Freshly cooked pudding. And all of a sudden you're hungry again. This is where learning these lean habits are really important. But more importantly, it's deciding how do I want to show up to this occasion, planning ahead. This is what I wanted to say. You mentioned how now it's going to the other side of the spectrum. And this is what I kind of hate, where people feel like, well, not people are made to feel like it's disordered or it's obsessive to plan ahead for XYZ, to look up the menu, to want to make healthy choices, to decide ahead of time, I'm eating this, and making sure that it's in line with my goals. People will say that's obsessive, that's restrictive, you're disordered. It's like, no, I'm choosing my battles and this battle isn't it. So I'm eating in a way that's going to make me feel good. And it's hard to do that when you're in quote unquote a large body, so to speak, because you feel like people are going to judge me, et cetera, et cetera. But no one is going to live with those choices aside from you. So make the choices that are in the best interest of your future self, in the best interest of, okay, what is tonight's version of you going to need from right now you? What are you going to want from yourself when you go to bed at night? Just future pace half a day. How do you want to feel at nighttime? Because these events are going to keep on coming. There's always an opportunity to eat. And something that I always have to tell myself is there's always food anywhere. If I can't have this now, I can easily just go to the shops. Like Christmas chocolate isn't just Christmas chocolate. If you want to make it Christmas chocolate, just get freaking Christmas wrapping and put the chocolate in Christmas wrapping. It's still chocolate. They don't make it any different. It's just the mindset to it. That's the thing. It's the mindset to it. It's the vibes that are around. So what are you celebrating? Are you celebrating the Christmas vibes, or are you there to just eat food? Because you can have both. It's just pick your battles.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's 100% it.
I just wanted to reiterate this whole thing that is the cornerstone to everything that we've just said, because it's not the fact that your food needs to be micromanaged a little bit more, or there's something that we need to perfect a little bit more in your food or perfect a little bit more in your training, and that's why you can't get results. And documentaries are flooding Netflix. Friggin' Instagram is getting flooded with more and more people spouting anything that is new and novel, because as humans, we're wired to learn something new. We love learning new things. And only those new things aren't actually accurate. We're not really learning anything. We're being tricked into things. So really, what is it that is the cornerstone to getting our results? And what are the lessons that you've learned stemming around this one main thing that we wanted this podcast to be about, as you've heard with the word lean minded?
Yeah, no, that's very well said, because there is a lot of noise in addition to like all the instability of our world. We just have these conflicting, contradictory, and otherwise extreme messages. We have comparative, social media things. So everything's just designed to confuse us, I feel. So yeah, it's like you said, right? Everything is just sort of flashy and new, and we're wired to sort of take in all this new information. I think a good rule of thumb when it comes to that, and first of all, I want to say, like, it's not about knowing more. I'm honest with everybody. You know enough to make amazing changes. You know what I mean? Like I'm not here to give you and feed you information. So a couple of things when it comes to discerning what's real, what's noise, what's hype is number one, look at what most people agree with, right? We could probably use more vegetables unless you're carnivore. We could probably use a little bit more leaner protein, right? We could probably drink a little bit more water. We could probably move a little bit more. We could probably sleep a little bit better. So I think when we draw on those commonalities that most people agree on, and we just double down on that. We just hone in on those things. And if the advice is boring, it's probably good advice, right? It doesn't make for good reels or social media. It's not compelling. It's not sexy. But most great advice is boring advice. So I would say like just the key to this is just like, tunneling in on the things that matter. Like my business coaches have told me the same thing. This is universally applicable, right? So and find your lowest hanging fruit. Again, what is going to be easiest? Take a look at your life. Meet your if you're a coach, meet your clients where they are. And if it's you just listening to this, meet yourself where you are. Okay, this is my life. This is what's possible. This is where I have to do a little bit better. And then it's practicing those skills, right? We got the 5 Ps. You got to be patient. You got to be present. You got to practice persistence and perseverance, and then, play. But part of that practice is just mastering some what I would call meta skills, basic skills, right? So you don't have to be an expert in any one of these realms, but it's about getting more competent. You don't have to be a master chef, but it is good to learn a handful of healthy-ish, tasty-ish, quick-ish recipes. You don't have to be like some time management maven, but it is about sort of prioritizing, carving out the time for meal preparation, for exercise, for lifting, whatever it is that's going to lead to your habits. And, and going to bed at a reasonable hour, that's not cutting away from your free time. It's actually giving you more, so basic lifting, you don't have to do anything fancy in the gym, like just, know how to push, pull, carry, hinge, that sort of thing. You learn the basics and then expand on the basics to make things and keep things interesting. And then, just move more. Get up and use movement as a default. Again, it doesn't matter how fast or how far you walk, just get out there and do something, and realize too that you're never more than 5 minutes away from turning things back into a positive, productive direction. So not getting too down and not getting too into the weeds of the self-criticism and, oh my gosh, I've already blown it, so I'm gonna, no, just like have that mentality where like, okay, who do I want to be? Who do I want to become? What's ideal me, healthy me? What would healthy me do? What does future me want? So just looking at it from that mind frame and just paying attention, right? Because so much of what we do is under a radar of consciousness. So if you are stressed and you're like, okay, I'm just going to go into the cupboard and eat whatever's there in terms of that's crunchy or rich or, highly caloric, highly tasty, just taking a step back and saying, okay, am I actually hungry? I've got these feelings. It's sort of like, okay, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to give 15 minutes. I'm just going to go for a walk, right? You talked about that. It's like filling one habit with another habit because there's 3 parts to a habit, right? There's a trigger, there's an action, and there's a reward at the end of it. So it's just changing that middle person, right? Changing that thing. You can still maybe get that high or that whatever it is, that dopamine hit is from like walking or just sort of doing a quick breathing exercise, or maybe there's a healthier option that's also crunchy, right? But just finding something and just accepting these cravings and these temptations as they come, not trying to fight them, but not trying to also give in to them.
I like that you actually said the middle person, because you are the middle. You're in transition and it feels like the messy middle, but in the process you become that person. It's not like you're becoming an entirely new person. And I think that's the greatest way to end this podcast, because those lean habits, the fact that you mentioned move more than once is my favorite part. And you probably saw me smiling, because moving more is the most underrated fat loss hack. People are so sedentary. And I literally, quote unquote, had a client say, you mean all I had to do was walk more instead of smashing myself with all of this cardio and hit? And it's like, well, yes, because the majority of people are getting like 3,000 or 5,000 steps a day. And then they wonder why. This is actually a great way to end the podcast. Someone was wondering, her deficit calories are 1,700, but deficit is not a deficit if you're just going based off, okay, so these numbers, I'm being told that these numbers are my deficit calories. It's not all about the calories in, it's the calories out. And when everyone was like, you're probably gut health, you're probably inflamed, you might need to do this detox thing, and people are talking about hormone imbalances and all this kind of bullshit. And I'm just like, can you just tell me how much you walk a day? Do you track your steps? She's like, I think I get about 3,000. I don't really have a lot of activity in my day because I work at my desk. Well, there is your hormonal imbalance in one sentence.
Exactly. Yeah, we chase these sort of biohacks and everything like that. It's like, well, are you sleeping? Are you moving? Like, what is your day to day? But yeah, no, we'd rather just no, we need to think we think we need to detox or jump in an ice bath or tape our mouth shut or wear a continuous blood glucose monitor to find some sort of like hormonal imbalance. It's like, well, no, just maybe try to sleep more. And but yeah, it sounds too elementary to sort of even work, right? But then you're like, but yeah, I think we have a misperception. I'm surprised somebody would actually say, oh, maybe I'm getting 3,000, 4,000. Usually they think they're getting like 8, 9,000, and then you sort of strap a pedometer to them and, oh, maybe not. And that's, it's a whole other podcast episode, but that's why sometimes tracking is a good thing.
It really is, and it's not disordered. And that was why I liked that post and why I jumped on it, because she was tracking everything. She's like, I'm doing this, I'm making, like, literally every single thing that I ate is within 1,700, and I'm not seeing any weight loss, and I should be, and she should have been, but she wasn't tracking the output. Like, it's not all about the inputs, it's about the outputs as well, and that's huge. Yeah. So that, I wish we actually started the podcast off with something around that, because I feel like that could benefit so many other people. But I feel like that is the leanest habit that you can have, especially around the holidays, because it's not just about now moving into a holiday hibernation mode where all of your usual activity just goes out the wall while there's more influx of food, because that's where most people get skewed up. So a good question for you guys to take on with you after listening to this podcast is, which of my habits, which of my thought processes lead into the direction of a lean lifestyle versus which ones are attached to a dieting mindset? Which ones are keeping me stuck right now? Where do I usually get pulled off track? How can I make sure that I stay on the trajectory of my goals? Because there is no such thing as a track. There is a trajectory, and that is heading in the direction of the person that you want to be, the identity, as Mike said. So where do you want to lead people? Where can people find you? And what do you want me to put into the podcast description below?
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, first of all, Ruby. This was awesome. I'm glad we finally had a chance to do this. It was a great conversation, and hopefully whoever's listening gets something out of it, just a few different tidbits. So I guess to sort of put a bow on it, like, just where are your easy wins, and take them. Take those easy wins, be gentle on yourself, and remember that you're never more than a few minutes away from just pointing that in your life into a better trajectory. We'll use that word because I love it, better than path or track, a trajectory. You can steer that ship in the right way, and just keep doing that. Don't ever give up on yourself, because you know what? You're worth it. And knowing that you're worth it is probably the biggest thing. So in terms of where to find me, Instagram is probably easiest at Lean Minded. And yeah, no, that's awesome. I guess that's about it. And then, yeah, sorry, maybe there was another question in there. I can't remember, but.
No, you just said something you just said something that was so powerful. And what was it? It was something around the fact that if you have that identity shift, you will start to do things for the sake that you're caring about yourself. And when you care about yourself, you're going to make sure that you water yourself like a plant. You're going to make sure that you're well nourished, that you're going to get the feeding that you need in order to flourish and grow. Whereas if you're always just being so hard on yourself all the time, how is that going to make you feel better by the end of it? You're going to hate the process. But yeah, Lean Minded, and I'll have your Instagram down below as well. And I thank you for coming. I thank you for coming on we had a little bit of an internet I would have edited it out. That kind of made me a little distracted, made us both.
Me too, sorry.
We got through in the end. If there is anything that stuck with you, let me know. This is a little bit more back to the basics of what are the habits and thought processes that you need to sustain the results that you want, and maybe relating to any mindsets that could be holding you back in terms of, I can't eat this way, versus I choose to eat in this way because I know that I feel good for eating in this way. And taking what Mike said, because it was something I was going to say as well, in the law of quarters, see your day in quarters. So if I screw up quarter of the day, how can I make the next quarter better? Because there is always an opportunity to pick yourself up and move towards the right trajectory versus moving downwards on the curve.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
with that, thank you for listening, and you will catch me on the next podcast. There we go.